الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم علمنا إبراهيم علمنا وفهم سليمان فهمنا. اللهم إنا نسألك علما نافعا ورزقا طيبا وعملا متقبلا. So today, as you all are aware, we're going to be starting a new book on the topic of Seerah, the biography of the Messenger Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. The poem is authored by Ibn Abdullah Al-Hanafi, and the poem is called Al-Urjuzatu Li'iyya fi Dhikri Hali Ashraf Al-Bariyya. Some lines of poetry in the biography of the best man to be created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Sayyid Waladi Adam, Khayri Khalqillah, Mahamed ibn Abdullah, Salawatu Rabbi wa Salamuhu alayhi. The lines are 100 lines of poetry. We're going to try to complete it in the next 4 to 5 weeks before Ramadan. And even before Ramadan, we want to complete another book on the ahkam of siyam, fasting. So inshallah we'll try to complete it before that. The tariqah is we will stick to the topics that the author mentions in the book. The affair of Seerah and the biography of the Prophet ﷺ is vast, and many authorships have been written in it. From the earliest of books is Al-Maghazi by Musa ibn Uqbah, Al-Maghazi, which translates to battles by Musa ibn Uqbah, but it encompasses more than just the battles, the life of the Prophet ﷺ that was related to it. We have also the book Al-Tabaqat ibn Sa'ad, and in the introduction, Ibn Sa'ad, he mentions the biography of the Prophet ﷺ. We have other books that come later on, the likes of Al-Bidayah wa Nihaya, the beginning and the end, which is talking about all of history. But at the beginning, he begins with the life of the Prophet ﷺ. Likewise, or a portion of it he mentions, in the book he mentions the biography of the Prophet ﷺ. Likewise, Seerah A'lam al-Nubala, the biography of the great scholars, noble scholars of Islam. He has in there the biography of the Prophet ﷺ. Then we have specific books that were written later on that are mukhtasarat, that are more summarized. Is the voice clear? Or is it okay? Everyone? We have some books that we refer to as summarized, mukhtasarat, summarized books in the topic of Seerah. And there are many. From those books is a book called Al-Fusul fi Sirat al-Rasul. Al-Fusul, chapters in the biography of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. A tremendous book written by Imam Ibn Kathir, rahimahullah ta'ala, and it's been translated into the English language a couple of years ago. We also have a book called Mukhtasar fi Sirati Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam by Sheikh Muhammad Abdul Wahhab. These two books are very similar in size and similar in content, even though Ibn Kathir in the beginning he has a special way of bringing about some of the events, especially the nasab, the lineage of the Prophet ﷺ, and all of his relatives, where they meet, how they are related, and inside the book he mentions a lot of grading of ahadith and verification of stories that have been mentioned, are they true or not, the likes of these affairs. From the modern time books that have been written in the Seerah is a book by Safi al-Rahman al-Mubarakfuri. Safi al-Rahman al-Mubarakfuri is a scholar from India, his origin, and he resided in Medina, and he wrote 2 books in the Seerah of the Prophet ﷺ. One of them is called Al-Rahiq al-Makhtum, the sealed nectar, and he won a prize. There was a competition in that time to write the best Seerah book, and he won the award for the best Seerah book in that competition. I think it was King Faisal Prize or the likes, and subsequently it was translated into all the languages that exist, English, French, and other than that. And that's a sealed nectar that's available till today. He's got another book in the biography of the Prophet ﷺ that's different from this, and it's also been translated, but the title of it is called When the Moon Split. The sealed nectar and When the Moon Split is the same author, but they are 2 separate authorships. They are similar in manner, but they are different. Okay, so there are other books that were written afterwards from contemporary scholars. Sheikh Salih Hussein has a book which is summarized. Sheikh Haytham Sarhan has a book which is summarized, which are very basic. But these lines of poetry in 100 lines is a nice introduction into the Seerah of the Prophet. He doesn't mention every single event, but he mentions the main events quickly, if it's the first time that you're going through the Seerah, and then from there you can go into these books that we've mentioned, like the Sealed Nectar and their book Al-Fusul. And then later on, if you want to go to bigger books like Al-Tabaqat and Al-Maghazi, then you can do so, inshallah ta'ala. So we'll start, and we'll try to take roughly 20 to 25 abiyat today, in each lesson, inshallah ta'ala, until we finish. The author is called Ali ibn Mahamed ibn Abdullah al-Hanafi. Ali, the son of Ali, the son of Muhammad ibn Abdullah al-Hanafi. Hanafi, referring back to the madhab of fiqh that he followed, the school of fiqh that he used to adhere to, which is the Hanafi madhab. And he's also famously known, this scholar is famously known for his explanation of sharh, his explanation of Aqidatul Tahawiyya. Imam al-Tahawi, he wrote the creed of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah as a Hanafi, and the belief of Abu Hanifa and the two students of Abu Hanifa, Muhammad bin Hassan al-Shaybani and Al-Qadi Abu Yusuf. And so Imam al-Tahawi wrote this book, which was named after him, Aqidatul Tahawiyya, and this author of the lines of poetry wrote an explanation of that book, and it's called Sharh of Aqidatul Tahawiyya, and it is the best explanation of Al-Tahawiyya. The author and the explainer are both Hanafi, and the creed is the creed of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. He says, we'll start inshallah the lines of poetry, we'll read the lines and then we'll go through the events that have been mentioned in brief. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله القديم الباري ثم صلاته على المختار وبعدها كسيرة الرسول منظومة مجزة الفصول. He begins by praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with his names and attributes, then sending peace and blessings upon the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And every time we mention his name, this is going to be a biography of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. We're going to mention his name often. Every time we mention his name, don't forget to say sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And don't let your tongues get bored from saying sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, for indeed in it is a reward for you every time you mention it. And the one that doesn't do it, then they're threatened with the dua of Jibreel that the Prophet ﷺ said Al-Ameen to. May his nose be rubbed in dust when your name is mentioned and he doesn't send peace and blessings upon you. وَبَعْدُهَا كَسِيرَةَ الرَّسُولِ مَنْظُومَةٍ مُجَزَةَ الْفُصُولِ. And afterwards, and to proceed, here is the biography of the Messenger in a summarized form of lines of poetry. Shaykh Abdurrazaq al-Badr, he mentions that here where he says منظومة مجزة الفصول, lines of poetry that has been summarized in chapters of the life of the Prophet ﷺ, is an indication that Ibn Abdullah al-Hanafi made the book of his teacher Ibn Kathir, Al-Fusul fi Sirat al-Rasul. He benefited from that book and he made it into lines of poetry. Yani he took from the book of Ibn Kathir, Al-Fusul that we mentioned earlier, and he changed it into lines of poetry and he summarized it. How? By the indication of using the same word, منظومة مجزة الفصول, some lines of poetry that have been summarized into chapters. He says, مولده في عاشر الفضيل ربيع الأول عام الفيل لكنما المشهور ثاني عشره في يوم الاثنين طلوع فجره ووافق 20 من نيسان وقبله حين أبيه حانا. He says that he was born in عاشر الفضيل ربيع الأول عام الفيل. He was born in ربيع الأول, the year of the elephant. There's ijma' and consensus on all of the historians and the Muslims that came after, that the Prophet ﷺ was born عام الفيل. عام الفيل. There are those that try to claim that he was born a year after it or two, but majority of them say that which everyone has come to an agreement is that he was born Al-Fil. What is Al-Fil? The year of the elephant. It's the year when Abraha, a man who resided in Yemen, who was under the kingship or under the rule, working for the Abyssinian state, tried to destroy the Ka'bah by gathering an army with large elephants in order to show his force and to destroy the Ka'bah that was in the deserts of Mecca. And when he did so, at that time, the people that lived in Mecca, all of them went into the mountains and went into the hills, and they said, indeed the Ka'bah lahu rabbun yahmih. Indeed the Ka'bah has a Lord that will protect it. And so when they tried to enter and the city was empty, elephants refused to walk towards the direction of the Ka'bah. Every time they came to that direction they were commanded, they would kneel on the ground and refuse to go forward. And whenever they told them to face another direction, the elephants would get up and they would go to south or west or east, any other direction apart from the Ka'bah. And so they tried to force it, Whilst that was occurring, Allah Azza wa Jal, He sent tuyur, birds carrying stones with fire. Each one had 3 stones, one under 2 wings and one in its mouth. And they came across and they pelted the army with these stones, destroying them. Most of the army perished from the stones. As for Abraha, the leader, he attained or he sustained injuries and he fled the scene and he made it back to Yemen, but he died from those injuries that he received from the birds. And Allah Azza wa Jalla, He revealed Surah Al-Fil in accordance to this event that took place. And the Arabs of old and other nations as well, they never used to memorize or count years. They wouldn't say year number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The Arabs never used to do this. There were other nations like the Romans and the likes, they would, but the Muslims or the Arabs, at that time never used to count the years. They used to remember a year by way of an event, a special event, a abnormal or a serious event that took place in that year, and they would remember the year as the year of such and such. And we have this year was called Al-Fil. We'll see in the Seerah later on that the Prophet ﷺ, when he lost his wife and Abu Talib in one year, it was called Al-Huzn, the year of grief. After the Prophet ﷺ passed away many years later and unity happened between 2 great armies of the Muslims, peace occurred between them, it was called Amul Jama'ah, the year of unity, coming together. And so they used to name or remember years by events that took place. Okay? So we have here the Prophet ﷺ was born in the year of Al-Fil, Rabi' al-Awwal. لكنما المشهور ثاني عشره في يوم الاثنين طلوع فجره. It says that which is famous is that he was born on the 12th of Rabi' al-Awwal, on Monday after Fajr. This is what is most prevalent and most famous, that he was born on the 12th of Rabi' al-Awwal. But no one knows exactly which day he was born from the historians. They mentioned the 9th, they mentioned the 11th, they mentioned the 12th, they mentioned the beginning, they mentioned the end. One of the Falakiyun, people that were specialized in this science, his name is Mahmoud Basha. He took the calendar of the Gregorian calendar, let's say, which follows the sun. They followed that back in accordance to the Monday that it would have occurred on. And he alludes to it. He says, وَوَافَقَ الْعِشْرِينَ مِنْ نَيْسَانَ وَقَبْلَهُ حَيْنُ أَبِيهِ حَانَ. This date was the 20th of April, the day that he was born. So Mahmoud Basha and another expert in the field, followed the calculations of the sun going back to the 20th of April in the year 571, the Roman calendar. They say after Christ, that's what they say. And they saw it to be the 9th of Rabi'ul Awwal. The 9th of Rabi'ul Awwal. Not the 11th, not the 12th. The 9th of Rabi'ul Awwal. This is the conclusion that they came to in accordance to the Gregorian. وعلى كل حال, whatever the case, what is thabit, what is agreed upon by everyone, is the hadith, the authentic hadith that the Prophet ﷺ mentioned, that he was born on a Monday. طيب. He says, وبعد عامين غدا فطيمة جاءت به مرضعه سليما حليمة لأمه وعادت به لأهلها كما أرادت فبعد شهرين انشقاق بطنه وقيل بعد 4 من سنه. So the Prophet ﷺ, he was born on a Monday, Rabi' al-Awwal, the month of Rabi' al-Awwal. Which day? That which is most famous is the 12th. But those that come after have said what's most correct is the 9th. Whatever the case, he was born in Rabi' al-Awwal on a Monday after Salat or after Fajr. He was born in Mecca, Meccatul Mukarramah, and at that time, Mecca was a place that had the remnants of the deen of Ibrahim and Ismail. Why is that the case? I've talked too much, now we need to ask questions. Why was Mecca a place where it has some of the remainders of the religion of Ibrahim and Ismail? The Ka'bah was there and they built the Ka'bah. Okay.
People used to claim they were from the lineage of Ibrahim.
People used to claim that they go back to the lineage of Ibrahim, which is fact. The Arabs go back to the lineage of Ismail to Ibrahim. Anything else? My question is, or my counter question would be, why is it the remnants of Ibrahim alayhi salam and Ismail? Why not Isa, the last prophet before Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Why not Musa?
Because Isa was from the lineage of Ishaq, not Ismail. And Ismail was left with his mom Hajar by Ibrahim in the deserts of Mecca.
I'm with you. But why didn't the Arabs of Mecca follow the last prophet that was sent before Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam?
Because Ibrahim is said to be like Hanafiya, and there were still people from that.
I'm with you, but that's not what I'm looking for. I'm going to come back to you.
Was it because monotheism was preserved?
Say again?
Monotheism.
Monotheism was preserved?
Yeah, it's because of that.
In Ibrahim, in the way of Ibrahim? Kind of?
The Nasara,
it's right, but it's not the answer I'm looking for.
The Nasara, they never spread Christianity or the message of Isa alayhi salam to Mecca or to Arabia, and the Yahud also never went to Mecca to spread it there, and so the only religion that was there was the religion.
Nus, you're halfway there.
Ibrahim's a Khalil.
It's true, but it's not what I'm looking for.
Ibrahim al-Islam, did he make a dua that for Mecca to be?
It's correct, but it's not okay.
Because Ibrahim was the Imam for the prophets after him.
It's correct, but not okay.
Ismail married into Jurhum.
Huh?
Ismail married into Jurhum, so he's married into...
Facts, but it's not okay. Why didn't Mecca, Ahl Mecca, the Kuffar Quraysh, the Arabs, follow the last prophet? Isn't it when a prophet comes, you follow the next prophet, you follow the next prophet? Why were they following the remnants of Ibrahim?
He wasn't sent to them. Isa wasn't sent to the...
أحسنت هذا الذي أريده. Isa alayhi salam was not sent to the Arabs of Mecca. One thing about the prophets of Bani Israel, the messengers and the prophets that were sent to Bani Israel, the children of Israel. Israel is who? Yaqub alayhi salam, the children of Yaqub. Those prophets were specific to those people. Is that clear? لِقَوْمِهِمْ خَاصَّةً. It was to their people specifically. So the Arabs, they had a specific prophet sent to them. Who was that? Ibrahim, then Ismail alayhi salam. So the people of Mecca had Ismail alayhi salam as a prophet. And since then, no one else came. That was the prophet that they had. And they were upon that tawheed and monotheism for many generations. Up until a man, Amr ibn, what's his name? Lu'ay, went to Sham and he saw idols there and he got impressed by it. So he brought it to Hijaz, he brought it to Jeddah. And from Jeddah they brought it to Mecca. And then shirk entered into the people of Mecca. But before that, they were upon the religion of Ibrahim and his son Ismail alayhi salam, Tawheed, for many generations. Okay? And so, Bani Israel, they were sent specifically to their prophets, and other people, they had specific prophets sent to them. Is that clear? Does that make sense? That's why they were following the remnants of that specific prophet that was sent to them. Were the people still following the way of Ismail alayhi salam, Ibrahim, the lifetime of the Prophet before he was sent prophethood? Some of them. They were. Zayd is mentioned to be following the way of Hanifiyya. He said, I'm not upon any of these polytheists, and he used to call his people away from polytheism and to worship the Lord of the Ka'bah. One Lord. He used to call it Tawheed, and they had a group of them, they were upon that. So there were people still upon the remnants of Ibrahim, or the religion of the way of Ibrahim and Ismail alayhi salam. And they had remnants in other things, apart from the aspect of Tawheed that they misfollowed. There were other aspects that they kept on to, like tawaf around the Ka'bah, even though they ruined it and they would go whilst they were naked and they would go around the idols and the likes. So they entered into things that weren't apart from it, but they had the remnant of tawaf. They had the remnants of Hajj. The Arabs would still come for Hajj every year, even before the Prophet ﷺ became a prophet. So these were things that were left from previous times, but it got mixed with shirk and kufr and the likes of these affairs. So the Prophet ﷺ was born in this environment. Before he was born, his father had passed away and he was still in the belly of his mother. And it's mentioned in some places that he was 2 years old when his father passed away, but that which is correct is that he was still in the womb and he was still in the belly of his mother. After he was born, it was the norm of the Arabs, as he mentions here next. وبعد عامين غدا فطيمة جاءت به مرضعه سليمة حليمة لأمه وعادت به لأهلها كما أرادت. Once he reached the age of when he was young, the norm of the Arabs at that time is that they would send off their children with nursemaids to breastfeed them and to nurture them in the bawadi, outside of the city, the villages. Why? They would say they will learn the pure Arabic language in the village, away from their city. And secondly, they will become stronger there and they won't be affected by the illnesses and the sicknesses that occur inside cities. And so they would take them out of the main city and into the villages and the bawadi. This was their norm. And so Halima, a woman called Halima Sa'diyah, from the tribe of Bani Sa'd, she came with the rest of the families and women folk that came to collect children for breastfeeding, as was their norm. And so when they came to Mecca, she came on a riding beast that was very slow. And so by the time she arrived, all the women before her went to every household and they all took a child to take for breastfeeding. And every single family went past the house of the Prophet ﷺ. But when they asked his grandfather Abdul Muttalib and the mother, they would tell them that he is yatim. Where is his father? His father has passed away, he's an orphan. So as soon as they would hear that his father has passed away already, they would refuse and they would say, sorry, we're not going to take your child, and they would go to the next house. Every single person that came on that trip did so, and they went past the Prophet and never collected. Up until Halima came, she found that all the other houses, the children of Mecca were taken. Khalas, there was none left. The only child that was left was who? Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So when she found out that he is yateen, she likewise refused at the beginning. But at the end she said to her husband, I do not want to return back to the village empty-handed. Let's go back to the orphan child and let's take him. Perhaps Allah will give us some khair from him. So they did that. And they took him. And as soon as they took him, they already saw khairat and goodness just from taking. From the first things that occurred is that the riding beast that they came on, the donkey that they came on, that was the slowest out of the group. Now it's mashallah, became an F1 race, Allah barik. He whipped past everyone. So the other family said, slow down, wait, you're leaving us behind. Isn't this the same donkey that you came with earlier? Yes, what happened to it? That's the first thing. Number 2, a drought was happening. And so they didn't have that much to eat. The mother Halima, she says, and this is mentioned by Mahamed ibn Ishaq in his Maghazi. And this is one of the reference points I forgot to mention earlier. Mahamed ibn Ishaq has a famous book called Al-Maghazi, and it's a big reference point that all the historians go back to. He mentions that Halima ibn Sa'diyah, she mentioned herself the story of her not having any milk in her breast to give her own children. And that her children would cry the night and they couldn't sleep because of the crying of their own children. They couldn't sleep themselves at night time. And so as soon as they picked up Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam as a child, she found that she had more than enough milk in her breast to feed Muhammad and to feed the rest of her children. And so for the first time in a long time, they slept peacefully, the parents and their children. As soon as they went back, their camel that they had would not bring out any milk before. And so the husband of Halima, his name is Harith ibn Abdurrazaq, he went to the she-camel and he tried to milk it, and to his surprise, there was milk within it, enough to feed him and the whole family. And so look how many changes just from the Prophet ﷺ coming to them. Their riding beast has become faster, upgraded. There's milk for their kids. There's milk for the rest of the family through the camel. And even the sheep that they had, that they would graze, and there's a drought happening. They would go to graze and they would come back and they would find that the sheep has milk. The other families started to notice, and they told their shepherd, wherever they take their sheep, take it along with them. And even then, the sheep of Halima bin Sa'diyah and her family would be full of milk and the rest wouldn't be. These were from the barakat, al-ri'aya al-rabbaniyah, the Allah Azza wa Jal nurturing and protecting and cultivating the Prophet as a child. And the barakah that comes with it and is benefited and seen at the hands of those that are looking after him. This continued for 2 years, up until he completed the time of breastfeeding. The time of breastfeeding was from a young child, up until 2 years old. After 2 years, they take them back to their parents. And so after 2 years, Halima bin Sa'diyah, or Halima to Sa'diyah, she took back the child to his mother, Amina binti Wahab, and she asked her permission if she can keep the Prophet ﷺ for another 2 years, for another period of time, in order for him to grow stronger, in order for him to increase in his language, in order for him not to get sick in the city. And the mother of the Prophet ﷺ allowed it. So they took him back. Every 6 months they would go back to the city to see their parents, but the rest of the time they would spend in the village. And they continued to see a lot of khairat and goodness from nurturing and holding and cultivating the Prophet ﷺ. up until an event took place. فبعد شهرين انشقاق بطنه وقيل بعد 4 من سنه. 2 months after she got permission to continue nurturing and looking after the Prophet ﷺ, a strange event took place. And this is mentioned in Sahih Muslim, and it's thabit that Jibreel alayhi salam came with another angel. They took Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. There were other kids. Put him down. The other kids ran away. They cut his chest open. They took out his heart physically. They brought Zamzam water. They cleaned the heart. And they took a portion out. They took something out that was near it. And said, this is your portion of the shaitan, and they took it out. After washing with the Zamzam in the basin, they put it back into its original place, and then they sewed him up. How old was he? 4. 2 years old, he went back to his mum. Then he came back. You're right, actually. It's 2 months back, sir. It's 2 years old. But some narrations mention, as it says here, after 2 months, and some say it was after 4, when he was 4 years old. So some narrations mention that it was 2, some narrations when he was 4 years old. What's more famous is that when he was 4 years old. Okay? This event takes place. The children, they go back to their parents and they say, Muhammad has been killed. He's dead. So the parents, they come and they find that the Prophet ﷺ is alive, but he's pale. And they can see the marks of the sewing, stitching. It's visible. And so this event scared them and frightened them. And so they took Muhammad ﷺ back to his parents. They took him back to his mother. And that was the end of his period with Halima in the Bawadi. وبعد 6 مع شهر جاء وفاة أمه على الأبواء. He continued to stay with his mother for the next 2 years, from the age of 4 up until 6. From 4 up until 6. And then his mother took a trip to Yathrib, which is where? Medina. The old name for Medina before the Prophet ﷺ moved was Yathrib. And so she took a trip to Yathrib to visit her maternal uncles and family members, and at the same time the father of the Prophet ﷺ, whose name is Abdullah, to visit his grave. He was buried in Medina. And so they went to Medina, they stayed there for a whole month. On their way back, the journey, at a place called Al-Abwa, she became sick on the journey and she passed away at this area of Al-Abwa. And the area still exists till today, between Mecca and Medina. The road between Mecca and Medina. She passed away here. The Prophet ﷺ was with his mother, with his grandfather Abdul Muttalib, and the nursing maid Ayman, the 3 of them. And so Ayman, along with Abdul Muttalib, took the child back to Mecca. The Prophet ﷺ, he mentions many years later that he asked permission to seek forgiveness for his mother. And Allah Azza wa Jalla never gave him permission. Why?
She wasn't Muslim.
Ahsant, she wasn't Muslim. Remember, this is before the Prophet ﷺ becomes a prophet, which is going to happen later on. And at the same time, the parents of the Prophet ﷺ weren't upon Al-Hanifiyah. They weren't upon the religion of Tawheed that Ibrahim ﷺ was on. They were following the majority of the Arabs at that time of mixing it with idols. And so Allah Azza wa Jal, this hadith is authentic, never gave him permission to seek forgiveness for his mother because they were not Muslim. And so the Prophet ﷺ then asked if he could visit her grave. And Allah Azza wa Jal gave him permission. And so he visited Al-Abwa to visit his mother. And so it's not allowed to seek forgiveness for someone, even if their parents even if they are their parents, if they are not Muslim. He went back to Mecca and he was put in the care of his grandfather from the age of 6 to the age of 8. His grandfather Abdul Muttalib at that time was like the chief of the Quraysh. And when they would meet each other, there was a specific carpet that he wouldn't allow anyone to sit on. If any child came and they sat there, they would remove him from that carpet. Except for the Prophet Muhammed ﷺ. He would come and he would sit there. And some of the uncles and other family members would try to move him. He would say, no, leave him, let him. فَإِنَّ لَهُ شَأْنًا. Indeed, I think he's going to have a great future ahead of him. He's going to be someone important. So he used to allow him to play. He used to give him the extra leeway. So his father passed away at what age? Before birth. His mother? 6. His granddad passes away now at 8. From 6 to 8 he's in the care of his grandfather. Then his grandfather passes away likewise. After his grandfather passes away, he goes in the care of his uncle Abu Talib, and he continues to be under the care of Abu Talib up until he becomes an adult. He says, وَجَدْتُهُ لِلْأَبِ عَبْدُ الْمُطَّلِبِ بَعْدَ 8 مَاتَ مِنْ غَيْرِ كَذِبٍ ثُمَّ أَبُو طَالِبٍ الْعَمُّ كَفَلْ خِدْمَتَهُ ثُمَّ إِلَى الشَّامِ رَحَلٍ. He says, after his grandfather Abdul Muttalib passed away at the age of 8, then he went in the care of his uncle, the paternal uncle, meaning the brother of his father, Abu Talib, looked after him. Now Abu Talib, his situation was, he had a lot of children already. Who can name me 2 of the children of? Ali, 1, easy. Ja'far, khalas, he took it all. Ja'far ibn Abi Talib and Ali ibn Abi Talib, amongst others. Okay? And Abu Talib had a lot of children and he didn't have a lot of wealth. Okay? And so for him to look after now another child was difficult upon him, but he still did so. He was the full brother of his father, meaning they shared the same father and the same mother. And so he put him in his care and he looked after him. Continued to look after him, and he found great khair and goodness in looking after him up until the age of 12. Another event took place. And notice the biography of the Prophet ﷺ, the way it's categorized is 2 ways. In most of the books, especially here in this poem specifically, but generally speaking, when studying the life of the Prophet ﷺ is split into 2 styles, 2 forms. The first is from birth up until the end of the Meccan period, that whole 53 years. Then it's split in terms of events that took place, main events. And so we have 0, then we skip to 2, then we skip to 4, then we skip to 6, then 8, next one 12, next one 25, next one 35, then we're at 40, then prophethood comes, then you're going to have events. This main event took place, the first 3 years, then it became public, then this event took place. Then Habasha took place. Then the 5th year, Hamza became Muslim and Umar became Muslim. Main events. It's not every single thing that took place year by year. It's more on the main events up until 53. After moving to Medina and performing hijrah to Medina, then the style changes. It's not just main events anymore. Now it becomes year by year. 10 years, year 1, this occurred. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Year 2, this occurred. Year 3, this occurred. Year 4, 5, 6, وهكذا. Every year there's numerous events that take place. And so the style that the seerah is set out in the second half is based upon chronologically each year what took place. Whereas in the first style, it's skipping. There's some years that you might not see anything, or only one main thing happen. Is that clear? So that's the same here, and generally whenever you read the Seerah books. طيب. He says وذاك بعد نعم ثم إلى الشام رحل. At the age of 12 years old, they made a journey to Syria. They were trying to go to Greater Syria, more correct. The Sham is Greater Syria. So we have Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, all of those countries that are next to it, they're all referred to as Sham, Greater Syria today. Syria is just a portion of it. But if you say Greater Syria, it encompasses all of it. On their journey there, they came across a monk called Bahira. Bahira was a Christian monk. And monks, they wouldn't live and mix with the people in the city. They would go out and isolate themselves and seclude themselves from the rest of the people. And so surprisingly, this monk came out in the road when the Prophet ﷺ was traveling with his uncle Abu Talib. And he hosted them and he gave them a feast. And he said, welcome, this boy is going to be the chief of the people, and he is a messenger sent by God. So Abu Talib's like, okay, sounds nice, thank you very much, but how do you know this? He said, mentions the two main things. He says, the trees and the rocks, they all started to prostrate in this specific direction that you are coming from. And the trees and rocks, they do not prostrate except to a prophet. Number 2, that he has the seal of prophethood. And he checked. He said, can I check? And turn around. And between the two elbows, the two shoulders of the Prophet ﷺ in the middle, there is a seal. Khatam al-Nubuwwah, the seal of prophethood. Every prophet has it. And he checked and he had the seal. And he said, these two signs, they are written in our scriptures. Remember, he was Christian. So they had the Bible. The Bible and the Torah, a lot of it is tampered with and changed and the likes. But there are aspects of it that are true. And throughout time it's been changed. So perhaps he was someone that was sincere. He saw the sign and he believed in it. And so when he saw this, he came out of his secluded hiding and his secluded place. And he hosted them and he gave them feast. And once he gave them the food, he took his uncle to a side. And he said to him, I advise you sincerely, turn back. Do not take this boy to Greater Syria. Why? Because the Yahud, if they find out these signs that he has, that the trees and rocks are prostrating to him, and that he has the seal of prophethood, I fear that they will kill him. Why?
Because he's an Arab and not from Bani Israel.
Ahsant. Because he's from a different ethnicity. He's Arab and he's not Yahudi, he's not Jew, he's not from Bani Israel. And they used to hope and boast and threaten other tribes that the final prophet will come from us and we will kill any of the enemies. They will say to the enemies, we will kill you when he comes to us. So if they find out that the final prophet is not from Bani Israel, from the same lineage, that he's from Arab, that they would do the work in killing themselves. And so Bahira, he warned them. Abu Talib, he heeded the advice. Remember, Abu Talib is not a Muslim, and he never became a Muslim. But he took the seriousness of this advice, he took it very seriously. The threat of it, he took it very seriously. And he took his nephew back to Medina. He says, وذاك بعد عام 12 وكان من أمر بحيرة ما اشتهر وسار نحو الشام أشرف الورى في عام 25 اذكرا. لأمنا خديجة متجرا وعاد فيه رابحا مستبشرا فكان فيه عقده عليها وبعده إفضاؤه إليها وولده منها خلا إبراهيم فالأول القاسم حاز التكريم وزينب رقية وفاطمة وأم كلثوم لهن خاتمة والطيب الطاهر عبد الله وقيل كل اسم لفرد زاهي والكل في حياته ذاق الحمام وبعده فاطمة بنصف عام وبعد 35 حضر بنيان بيت الله لما اندثر. The next event is when he was 25 years old. So the previous event, which age? 12. That he attempted to go to Greater Syria, but he never went. The next event is 25. Like between 12 and 25, did things happen? Of course things happen. Are they mentioned? Some of them are mentioned. But we'll follow the order of the author. If you read other Seerah books, and we'll do Seerah again in the future in more detail, they will have more detail. And so they said that he was a shepherd for a time. They mentioned that there was a war that took place. They mentioned that there was a peace treaty after the war. That took place between 12 and 25. But we skipped that because the author never mentioned it. At 25, he went out on a business trip on behalf of Khadija bint Khuwaylid radiyallahu ta'ala anha, and he performed business on her behalf to sell her goods in Greater Syria. And he went personally with her slave Maysara, who accompanied the Prophet ﷺ, and he sold all the goods, and he managed to get loads of arbah, loads of profits, exceeding the norm of what the profits that she would usually get. When he came back and he gave all the profits, and Maysara gave the report of what he saw from the Prophet ﷺ, his honesty, the way he deals with people, the way he is, the likes of these affairs. This intrigued Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha, and so she mentioned it to her companion, who then mentioned it. It was mentioned to the Prophet ﷺ, the proposal that Khadija radiallahu anha is interested. And so the Prophet ﷺ, after hearing about Khadija and her good qualities and the likes, mentioned it to his uncles, and his uncles mentioned it to her uncles, and they made it happen, and alhamdulillah in the end they got married. He got married to Khadija radiallahu anha at the age of 25 after this business trip, roughly 2 months after coming back from the business trip. Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha was 28 years old in that which is most correct. It's mentioned in some sources, in some reference points, that she was 40 years old. But what's most correct? The other sources mention 28. And what's more correct and seems more possible is 28. Why? Because she went on to have all the children of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Okay? So bearing 6 children. After that, at the age of 40, spaced out over the next 20 years, it's hard. But from 28, it's more possible. Ala kulli hal, whether it was 28 or it was 40, the Prophet ﷺ was younger than her, and this occurred when the Prophet ﷺ was 25 years old. طيب. The next event that he mentions, before that, at 25, the author then goes on to mention the children that Khadija radiallahu anha bore for the Prophet ﷺ. He says, وَوُلْدُهُ مِنْهَا خَلَى إِبْرَاهِيمِ. She gave birth to all of these children except for one child, Ibrahim, the son of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, who the mother is Maria al-Qubtiyya, Maria the Coptic. So apart from Ibrahim, the rest of these children, Khadija radiallahu anha is the mother. And so he mentions them in order, and even though there's difference in the ordering, but this is what he mentions. فَالْأَوَّلُ Qasim, the first of the children is Qasim, has a takreem. He is the first one to get the honor. And so the Prophet ﷺ was named, or his kunyah was named after the first child of Al-Qasim, Abu Al-Qasim. This is a 'adah and a norm of the Arab. No other culture used to have the affair of kunyah. What's kunyah? That a person is called Abu so-and-so, the father of so-and-so, or so-and-so, the mother of so-and-so. So this is something that is specific, that was specific to the Arabs at that time. No other culture had it. And the way they would use it is, they would give themselves the nickname, the kunyah, after their first child. And others would address them with it out of honoring them and sharaf. But I'd like to pay attention to one thing that is a way that's misused today by many people in a wrong manner, which is, they would never say, if they were asked, what is your name? I ask you, what's your name? Mustafa. What's your kunya? Inshallah, your kunya is Abu Abdurrahman. Khalas. Huh? Let's say you have a child in the future, you call the first child Abdurrahman. Abu Abdurrahman. Tayyib? I ask you now, what's your name? Still Mustafa, right? If you said to me, Abu Abdurrahman, is it right or wrong? Is the information right or wrong? Huh? Why do I see some people hesitating? Right or wrong?
Right.
Wrong. Why? The information, right? It's right. It's not lying. It's truthful. It's right. But is this the way that they would use it? This is not the way they would use it. If someone was to address them and say to them, what is your name? They will give their first name, their second name. Someone asks me, you ask me, Mustafa, what's my name? I say Mahamed ibn Abdulrazaq. I don't say my name is, or call me Abu Abdullah. Today, especially in the West, and it's not one person, two people, it's a lot of people that do it. You see, what's your name? First time you met them, Assalamu alaikum, akhi, I have a small talk and you say, what's your name? My name's Abu Fulan. This is not the way they used to use it. That's not your name, that's your kunyah. Why? Because the kunyah is sharaf. It's honor. Others address you with it to honor you. But when you're speaking about yourself, you don't call yourself by that honorary title, if you like. Rather, you just give them your first and second name. Is that clear? So if you're meeting someone and they ask you what's your name, you give them your first and second name. And then, if they ask you later, mashallah, Abu Man? Abu Abdullah. You're the father of who? Abu Abdullah. Khalas, now they know your kunya. If they call you in the future, if I see you over there, I say, hi, Abu Abdurrahman, ta'al. I'm honoring you by calling you Abu Abdurrahman, or Ibrahim, or Abdullah, Omar, ila akhir. This is the affair of kunya. The kunya of the Prophet ﷺ was Abu Qasim. Then he says, وزينب رقية وفاطمة وأم كلثوم لهن خاتمة. Then the daughters, he mentioned Zainab, then Ruqayya, and these two, and Fatima and Kulthum. So 4 daughters. Zainab was someone that became an adult in the lifetime of the Prophet ﷺ. She had a child, and the Prophet ﷺ met her child, his granddaughter. She was called Umama, and it's mentioned in the hadith that the Prophet ﷺ was praying a salah, and Umama was there, and he picked her up. And so Umama, she gave child to Umama. Ruqayya was married to Uthman bin Affan, radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. Fatima, which was married to none other than Ali ibn Abi Talib, and Kulthum, who was also married to Uthman. Question. How is it possible that Uthman was married to 2 daughters of the Prophet ﷺ, and Allah Azza wa Jal in the Quran forbade us from marrying 2 blood sisters?
Because one of them died
تجمعوا بين الأختين, that you combine between 2 sisters.
Is it because one of them died before he married the other?
Ahsant. Because one of them, he never married them at the same time. The verse is talking about the same time. Okay? Uthman was married to 1, then she passed away. Then the Prophet ﷺ gave him his next daughter in hand for marriage. And she likewise passed away in the lifetime of Uthman and the Prophet ﷺ. And the Prophet ﷺ said, if we had another daughter available, we would have given her to you. And this is why Uthman is called Dhun Nurayn, the companion of the two lights, because he's the only man in history from the time of Adam alayhi salam till the day of judgment that was married to two daughters of a prophet at two separate times. And so this is Ruqayya and Kulthum, the two daughters of the Prophet ﷺ, Fatima or Nawaba and Zainab. And the last he mentions is وَطَيِّبُ الطَّاهِرُ عَبْدُ اللَّهِ وَقِيلَ كُلُّ اسْمٍ لِفَرْدٍ زَاهِي. The last name that he mentions is Abdullah. Al-Tayyib, Al-Tahir, Abdullah. They mention that his name is Abdullah and he's referred to as Al-Tayyib, the pure, Al-Tahir, another way of saying pure. And his actual name was Abdullah. And this is what he refers to in the first line where he says وَالطَّيِّبُ الطَّاهِرُ عَبْدُ اللَّهِ. These first two are adjectives describing him, and his name is Abdullah. And there's others that said no, each name, Al-Tayyib, Al-Tahir and Abdullah, are three different sons of the Prophet ﷺ. But what's most correct is that it's one. It's all referring to Abdullah. So two sons, Qasim and Abdullah, and four daughters, all from Khadija radiyallahu ta'ala عنها. والكل في حياته داق الحمام وبعده فاطمة بنصف عام. All of them passed away in his lifetime. All of his children passed away in his lifetime. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Except for Fatima. Except for Fatima, all seven of his children passed away, including Ibrahim. All of them passed away except for Fatima. She passed away 6 months after he passed away. And he knew she was going to pass away after him because he gave her the glad tidings. When he told her that he will be passing away, she cried, and he gave her glad tidings that she will be meeting him shortly after. And so 6 months later, she likewise passed away. So if we just stop for a second and we just ponder over so far the biography of the Prophet ﷺ, how he went through trials, tribulations as a child and as an adult before prophethood and in his time as a prophet. He's born an orphan, his father's not there. His mother passes away at the age of 4. His grandfather then passes away. 6. 6 his mother passed away. Grandfather passed away at 8. 3 of his family members that looked after him have passed away now, or that were in charge of him. All of his children, 7 of them in number, he had to bury them himself. Ibrahim alayhi salam was 1 year old. Abdullah was a child. Qasim was a child. Ruqayya and Kulthum are adults. Zainab, every single one of his children, he had to bury himself. This is an example for those that are going through trials and tribulations, difficulties, whether it's being an orphan, whether it's losing a parent, whether it's losing children. That you have fi Rasulillahi uswatun hasana. You have in the Messenger ﷺ an excellent example. Many people, they will say, I'm disadvantaged, and so I've got no aspirations, I've got kada, they push themselves low and put themselves into a mode of isolation and maybe depression and the likes. Look at the Messenger ﷺ. Look what he went through. Look at what he became. So whenever we're going through something, and all of us will go through something, trial, test, the illness, the loss of a loved one, and we'll look back to the Seerah of the Prophet and read this biography, tremendous biography of this noble man, and you will find in it solace and peace and an example to be patient. The last event that we will take today, he says in line number 20, in the following lines. He says, وَبَعْدَ خَمْسٍ وَثَلَاثِينَ حَضَرْ بُنْيَانَ بَيْتِ اللَّهِ لَمَّا أَنْدَثَرْ وَحَكَّمُوهُ وَرَضُوا بِمَا حَكَمْ فِي وَضْعِ ذَاكَ الْحَجَرِ الْأَسْوَدِ ثَمْ. He says, the next event at the age of 35 years old. A flooding happened in the city of Mecca. And the Ka'bah was somewhat in a bad shape after that. And so the tribes that lived in Mecca at that time, Quraysh, they came together and they came to an agreement to fix the Ka'bah and to rebuild it. And so they began the works, but they all feared that if they tried to knock down the Ka'bah to put it back into its foundation, that maybe whoever does it, that they will be struck by rocks, by birds or lightning, or be destroyed by Allah. Because remember, it's not that long ago when it occurred. The Prophet was 35 years old. So some of the chiefs of Quraysh were alive when they saw the destruction of Abraha and his army. And so there was this awe of the Ka'bah and respect for it. So even though they wanted to rebuild it, to fix it, they were scared whoever does it, something bad will happen to them. And so all of them were scared, except for one of them. He started it. And he said, I am a reformer, I'm someone that's fixing it, I'm not destroying it. Allah won't destroy someone that is fixing his Ka'bah. And so he was the first one to knock it down to its original. So when he started, the people were watching him, no one joined him. When they saw that nothing happened to him, everyone else partook and they helped him in knocking down the Ka'bah into its original foundation. And this happened over history, even after this, a couple of times. One of the last times it occurred was, I believe in the 80s, in the 70s or the 80s it occurred. The Ka'bah was knocked down. I don't know exactly how, if it was completely knocked down, but it was rebuilt. There was some repairs that needed to take place. And they saw the foundation. The foundation can't be knocked down. And Shaykh Hussein al-Abbas, I attended one of his lessons and he mentioned that the old Imam of Masjid al-Haram, Shaykh Mahamed ibn Zubayr, he mentions that they went down and saw the foundations. And they said the foundations we saw was nothing like we've seen today. In terms of how strong it was, the build, the way that it was. They said, perhaps some of the narrations that mention that either angels built it or the jinn before the human beings set it up. Because remember, Ibrahim alayhi salam, he was commanded to build on top of the foundation. Did he build a foundation? No, but he found the foundations like this. And he built the Ka'bah on top of it. And so it's still like that till today. Yeah, let's go.
So what is foundation?
Foundation is the bottom of it. Have a house, have the...
On the floor?
Yeah.
When he said the 70s and the 80s, is that 19?
Yes, 1970s, 80s. I don't know exactly when, but in recent times it was redone. Shaykh Hussein al-Abbas mentions it in his book as well. He's got a book talking about Mecca and the virtues of Mecca, and he mentions this story as well. Well, yeah. And so when the Kuffar Quraysh did this, they knocked it down and they built it back up. And there was a Roman architect that came and helped them build it. And they made a promise to each other. Remember, the Kuffar of Quraysh, they're not Muslim. They're involved in shirk. They earn money from that shirk, idolism, that people comes for idols and they make money from it. And they make money from riba, usury, and prostitution and the likes of these haram means. But they still had something within them that said, when we're rebuilding this Ka'bah, we're only going to use the money that is pure, that is halal, that is not mixed with money taken from idols, idol worship, nor from prostitution, nor from riba and the likes of these haram means. And they did so. They gathered all their wealth that was pure, and they did the rebuilding of the Ka'bah. But what occurred was, they never had enough pure money to finish off the building of the Ka'bah in its original form that they found it. So they decided, instead of rebuilding the rest of it with haram money, they left the mark to show that the original Ka'bah goes up to here. You know what the mark is? It's the semicircle that we still have till today. So we have the Ka'bah. Next to it we have that semicircle, right? That semicircle is still part of the Ka'bah. That the original Ka'bah used to go up to that semicircle and up. But they never had enough pure money, and so they left that as a sign, and it was kept like this. The story goes that the final piece of the rebuilding was placing the Hajar al-Aswad, the black stone, in its place. Now the history of the Hajar al-Aswad, there's books written on it. There's a book written just on the black stone. Okay? On the athar, the fada'il, the virtues, and the likes. Some mention that it's from Jannah. Some narrations mention that it's from the heavens, and the likes of these affairs. The Hajar al-Aswad, and that it will be a witness for a person on the Day of Judgment, and the likes. Placing this Hajar al-Aswad back into its original spot, a dispute happened. What's the dispute? Who is going to place it back into its original place? They almost raised their swords in fighting one another, and who's going to place the black stone back into its position. How is this related to the Messenger? This is when he comes in play. One of the elders from the chiefs of Quraysh gives them an idea. He says, look, the next person that walks into the masjid, into Masjid al-Haram, the Ka'bah area, the next person that walks in, let him judge between you. They said, okay. Who walks in? Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so they tell him of the dispute and judge between us. And they all became happy that it was Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Why? Because by now, they grew up to know him to be Al-Ameen. As-Sadiq Al-Ameen. The trustworthy one, the truthful one. So they were happy with whatever he judges. So what did he judge with? Allah Azza wa Jalla gave him the wisdom to say, every single tribe, get together, we're going to get the black stone, put it on a cloth. We're going to put it on top of the cloth. And every one member of each tribe will hold a part of the cloth. So one here, one here, one here. Everyone's got a partakes in the holding of the cloth. And you carry it together up until the Ka'bah. And then I will place it in. You see, they all became pleased with that judgment. And they did as he advised with. And the Prophet, he's the one that put it back into its original place. This all occurred when the Prophet was 35 years old. Another great event, before he becomes Prophet, solidifying his position in this as a station amongst the rest of the people as a trustworthy, truthful person, someone we can trust, and he just prevented a large feud and the spilling of many people's blood. Now the history of the Ka'bah itself is an interesting topic which went through, later on he went through many marahil itself. The Prophet ﷺ, he says, after the conquering of Mecca later on, he said to Aisha, لولا حديث عهد قومك. Oh Aisha, if it was not that your people, the people of Mecca, were new to entering into Islam, then I would have rebuilt the Ka'bah in its original form. Remember the Prophet ﷺ, he was 35 when they put that semicircle indication. So before that, the original Ka'bah was there. Now many years later, when he conquered Mecca, he said if your people had not just entered into this, meaning they're new to Islam, it will be too much for them to bear if we rebuild the Ka'bah in its original form. That maybe some of them will leave Islam because they're still new. So he didn't do it because of this bigger benefit. And this is, we benefit from this, that sometimes there's something good to do, but there's so many harms that are connected to it, greater harms, that we leave off this good thing. It would have been a good thing to do, but we stop doing it just so we don't bring about all these major harms. So if the Prophet ﷺ did it, maybe some of them would have said, he called us to this Islam just to change our Ka'bah. And some of them exit Islam. That's a great harm. So the Prophet ﷺ left it alone. But years later, Abdullah bin Zubayr was in charge of Mecca. And he said, Khas, the people have been Muslims for a long time, no one's new to Islam. He put the Ka'bah and he rebuilt it in its original form, in its original shape. He actually did it. How come we don't see it? Why do we still see the semicircle then?
Adjust.
Huh? Not just that. He put it back in its original shape. And the Prophet ﷺ said, I would have put 2 doors instead of 1 door. Because the Kuffar al-Quraysh, when they rebuilt it, they only placed 1 door. And they left it high. Why high? Because that way no one can enter it except the one that they give permission to enter. So the Prophet ﷺ said, I would have made 2 doors for it. 1 to go in, 1 to come out. And I would have let the people go in. So Abdullah bin Zubayr, he fulfilled that which the Prophet ﷺ wanted to do. What happened? Another king ruler comes later and he says, no, why did he change it? We're going to put it back to how it was in the lifetime of the Prophet ﷺ. So he puts it down and he builds it back and he leaves the semicircle again. So in the time of Imam Malik, one of the rulers at that time, I can't remember the name of the ruler at that time. He says to Imam Malik, he wants to put it down, put it back to how Abdullah bin Zubayr did. Imam Malik, who had a great foresight, he said, don't do it. Why? Don't make this affair لُعْبَةً بَيْنَ الْأُمَرَاءِ. Don't make the Ka'bah that has this awe and reverence in the hearts of the Muslims some game in the hands of the rulers. This one changes it to full, this one changes back to semicircle, this one changes to full every couple of years. Leave it how it is. Close this door. And it was great advice. The ruler listened to him, and from that day, from the time of Imam Malik, he lived in the 2nd century, until today, 1,200 years later, the Ka'bah hasn't been changed since then. Okay, that's the story of the Ka'bah. And perhaps we'll stop here, inshallah ta'ala. The next part is obviously 40 years old and the start of prophethood. And we'll continue with that next Thursday, inshallah ta'ala.